Howdy, y'all. You got the Bulldog on the channel. I'm not resting here. I am checking out this Dodge Ram, or Ram as they call it now. They wanted to get their name off of it, I guess. Codes in the computer are for both rear wheel speed sensors. And I thought, well, I wonder if this has got two sensors or one. It would make sense if both sides are reading bad circuit codes, not signal codes or intermediate codes, or not intermediate, brain fart, intermittent codes. Yes, intermittent codes. Boy, my head is just, the wheel's spinning, but the hamster is dead. Intermittent. They're not intermittent. It's reading left and rear wheel speed sensor circuit, and then it's got another code in it for the drivetrain module, implausible data from ABS. That's a loud bird. Now, I figure I'd get back here and check before I go diving into getting parts or anything like that. And I'll show you what I found. This is a nice place on a four-wheel drive truck to put delicate electronic equipment. Don't you think? Right on the front side of the rear axle where it can get torn up. I mean, look at that. I wonder why it was throwing a code. We're going to venture over there to the other side, see if we find the same thing. Here we got the other side. I messed around with it and pulled a little bit, and out pulls this wire too. So at least there's enough on both sides that I can solder to it and repair all this. But not everything is going to be, hard parts. Okay, this is attempt number 3 on getting my point across. My first attempt was when I slid out from underneath the truck up there, and I spoke at length about what I had done and why. And then when I was previewing my video to put it together, I realized that I had neglected to change the zoom on the magic box, and I relayed a huge amount of information. However, the visual was of my left nostril. So I started talking here, and I forgot to pause my television, and halfway through it went, eh! I still don't know what that was, but it's paused now too. Now, here we go. The reason that you double check that getting codes is only a starting point. The reason you double check is because, just as we just saw, it doesn't mean the sensors are bad. It might be wiring going to them. That's why you pay attention to what the code says. I mean, the code will say, oh, it's a O2 sensor. I was like, okay, which code? Is it a lean O2 sensor? Is it a rich O2 sensor? Is it a heater on the O2 sensor? So there are huge things that you can check that will tell you, well, should we get a part or not? In this instance, I assumed that we were looking at a wiring problem, maybe a bad sensor. Of course, it said right and left. What's the possibility? What's the chance of two sensors having the wires ripped out of them? Well, whenever they put them on the front of the axle, it's a pretty good chance. So, would a parts changer have found that when he went to change the parts? Probably would have on the right side sensor because the wire was hanging out. It was pretty obvious. Now on the left side, no. He wouldn't have caught it. Because it has that hard casing around the wiring, and about that far up in it, that wire was good. So I had to pull pretty good, and it just come apart, slid right out. Now, as you'll see when I follow up, I cut everything apart, peeled it out of there, soldered it, heat shrinked it, put it back together, and cleared the codes out, took it out and drove it. We're good. But this is something that you kind of learn if you want to be really honest with your customers. Whenever they call for an estimate, you don't start quoting prices or even estimating prices on something you don't see, because this repair ended up being pretty cheap for what it was. The whole repair was less than the cost of replacing parts. And I charge for diagnostic too. So finding out what's wrong, paying for something for diagnostic, can save you money in the long run, usually does. The guy that talked to me yesterday, he said, well, you guys, you're kind of like veterinarians, aren't you? Okay. He says, you don't know what kind of animal's coming in next. Yeah, that's right. There are times when we can have a 99% probability we know what we're going to be looking at when it shows up. Such as the guy that I talked to the day before, who came in and said, I've got a, I don't know what year it was, 2011, 2012 Chevy 6.0, and it's got an exhaust leak up by the manifold. Well, it's got to have broken bolts. Oh, I thought I looked at him. I didn't see anything broken. And I told him where to look. It's going to come in. I'm going to check it before I start on anything. That's what you do. You can prep as much as you can. Always get the vehicle there and find out what it is wrong before you start throwing parts at it. We're confirming our repair on this Dodge truck with the ABS sensors. Here's what I do. Pull up the data on my Snap-on Verus here, and I just watch all the speed sensors. There's both rear speed sensors and then a front speed sensor just for good measure. They're all matching. And that just goes to show you that you need to have it here and look at it and do some due diligence before you go throwing parts on, because this got fixed for the labor of getting into that harness and soldering it together and a little bit of heat shrink.